Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, and I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant of Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, we believe that hope is not a sales strategy. And so every single week, sometimes multiple times a week, we are here to bring the very best lessons from the battlefield into business so that we can increase the performance of salespeople, the results of their pipelines, and the results of their teams. Now, if it's your first time with us or it's your 60th time with us, that's about how many episodes we've had here. We bring on guests on this show. My search every single week is to go and find the most brilliant people that I can find in the field of sales. And that means over the course of the last year and a half, we've been able to interview best-selling authors, Hall of Fame speakers, sales trainers from around the country, around the world, and of course, those that are actually out there in the field managing and building. She is. Sarah, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Wonderful. So, Sarah, tell us a little bit about your company and the types of organizations that you work with, because I know you help organizations stand up sales teams, or you go into an established team and help them get a little better. But tell me specifically, what's the process behind that? Do I have to be in a certain industry, a certain company, a certain size? Talk to me about the work that you do so we can talk about how you systemize that for the organizations that you're employed by.
Yeah, that sounds great. So we work with companies all sizes, all industries. What really people come to us for is for either building or scaling that sales development function. So it might be an early stage company. Maybe you're a founder who's just trying to move away from founder-led sales for the first time. You want to outsource that piece of the prospecting you probably don't have time for, but you want to set it up correctly the first time. We know that it's a pretty difficult thing to do. There's a lot of kind of trial and error, iteration. Sometimes it takes a really long time to build up. So that's why people would come to us to help them build it out right the first time. And then all the way up to kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. Maybe you're a large company and we're working with some, a pre-IPO large funded companies that are looking to either build out the outbound team for one specific, product or feature, or who just haven't focused on that at all, and have, relied on inbound or maybe field sales. And now we're looking to add this other channel to the pipeline.
So one client that I'm working with right now is going through a pretty similar stage of growth where they've got a sales team and it's a founder-led company. So every
Mhm.
single person that he's onboarded, he's had to walk through step by step. Here's how you find leads, here's how you qualify them, here's how you prospect, here's how you conduct outreach, here's how you meet, negotiate, deliver proposals, and sell. And every single person's been brought along individually and is quickly
Mhm.
realizing that's just not scalable. If I want to bring
Yeah.
on a team of 10, I don't have 10 years to train all these folks, linearly in that order. So I'd love to hear from you. What are the chief challenges that you find somebody's suffering from? Because I know there's a lot of
Yeah.
CEOs, a lot of sales VPs and founders out there that even if they think they've got great sales process, they're still having to train every single salesperson individually every step through the sales cycle. Walk us through a little bit about how you help solve that problem for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Super common challenge. We see that across the board. Yeah, they maybe have all of the elements of a really strong playbook, but they live in different places. Some of them are kind of just in people's heads, kind of tribal knowledge. And so, like you say, it's really not scalable. And the best way to solve that, and of course, it ties really in well with Sean, what you kind of speak about in all of your work, is having a playbook or a system, a kind of unified, centralized place that all that information lives. That has the biggest impact on exactly the problem that you're talking about, bringing on new salespeople. If they have that Bible to go look at, the people around them are kind of working with the good habits, following that Bible, they hit their stride. They kind of hit the ground running. Um, so the difficulty, the biggest challenge is distilling all that information into that one place. But it's had a huge impact. There's one client that comes to mind. They were kind of growing organically. They have a great product. They've really got product market fit. So they were experiencing just the sort of growing in spite of themselves.
Mhm.
And then they wanted to scale it, make it more repeatable, all those things. And they brought on a few SDRs. Of course, they're kind of bringing in the information from different places. It takes maybe 3, 4, 5 months for SDRs to really ramp and start repeatably producing. We built that playbook for them, got it all in one place, really drilled in those systems and all the content and the go to market stuff that lives behind it. And their newest SDR was making calls in 3 days. He hit his quota in
Wow.
month 1, and in month 2, he was their top performer. So I think that's the perfect kind of example of how this does solve that problem.
You just got the attention of everybody that's had to hire someone new in the field of
Yeah,
sales. Like calls in a couple of days and
yeah,
actually meeting quota inside of a month. And we got salespeople on the team, sir, that haven't met quota in 6 months. You know what I
absolutely.
mean? Like that's a crazy problem. So talk to me a little bit about where you found the best place for this system to be, because I've seen it done as low tech as an actual binder, like a flip page notebook, to as high tech as a CRM with
Mhm.
task sets and in every aspect of the sales cycle. You can imagine something happening. There's a task set there to launch so that you can really remove hope every step of the way and be more present. And there's
Yeah.
probably something in the middle. So I'd love to hear about where you find the best place to house all of these processes and systems are, given the fact that it might take us a while to get them all built, but they got to start
Sure.
somewhere. Where do I keep
Yeah.
them?
Absolutely. So for me, the biggest piece is accountability. So
Mm,
wherever your team is doing their day-to-day work, it depends if they've got maybe a manager that's overseeing them. You can kind of go a little bit more on the lower tech end if you've got somebody that can be there to help guide people through it. If you don't have somebody like a manager and you're just expecting these SDRs to sort of take care of themselves all day, every day, you want to go more high tech and have it live in the systems where they do their work every single day. The way we actually build it out at first is just in a Google Doc. It's just,
mm.
documents that are kind of linking out to different places, starting all the way up from the go to market stuff, like who are your personas, what are their pain points, like who are your competition, that kind of thing. And then all the way to as granular as here's your call script, here's how to handle this objection. But at the very least, it's got to be one Google Doc, like one place where people know where they can find it. It links to all the places they need to find different content. And then I would say how you determine where to keep it forever all comes down to accountability. So if you've got
Mm.
somebody that can help hold people accountable, you can have it a little bit lower tech and leave it there. If you're going to have maybe a larger team, the ratio of kind of SDRs to SDR managers is lower or higher. Then you're going to want to have it in your systems.
Love it. And so you talked a little bit about Google Docs, which I absolutely love as well because it's not in my head.
Yeah.
It's universally accessible. All I need is an internet connection and it
Mhm.
can be shared. And so you think of what an improvement that is over just how most sales organizations do it, which is, I've got senior reps that know a lot and junior reps that are going to have to learn the hard way and have a
Mhm.
lot of lost sales. Some organizations are a little better in that they've got a salesperson with a binder, a notebook. Well, that never leaves them and they actually have to physically share it. And
Yeah.
you've got, of course, these organizations like you and I are working with that recognize the power of technology. They see the value in a Google Doc or in getting those things into a CRM. So there's a great technological leap you can go through that's just about free of charge. You're already paying for an internet connection. Google Docs cost you nothing. You can house probably thousands of them. I've never actually tried to hit my Google Doc limit, sir. I don't know if you
Yeah.
have,
Me
but
neither. We're nowhere close still
nowhere
after,
close, right?
working with
Yeah.
hundreds of companies. So yeah.
Right? With links going out everywhere, and that's critical in that not every doc needs to be a 900 page flow.
Mm-mm.
Um, you know, Start small with just a call script, and then if you got objections, let's link that out to the objection sheet so you can find it quickly. There's all kinds of interesting ways that you can make something very succinct, very easy to navigate, and still get the job done in the field of sales. So I'm curious, when you go into an organization, you start to work with these leaders, they know they have a problem, the top line is they need more sales, and there's a whole bunch of struggles they have underneath it. Well, I'd love to know from you, because you've gotten to be close enough with these folks in the onboarding process to really hear their pain points. Where do
Mhm.
you find the leaders that you work with in these sales organizations relying on hope a little more than they should in their sales process? Where's that big area that you tend to run across more often than not?
Yeah. The biggest area for me is um, there's a disconnect in between the kind of input that's going in on the prospecting sales development side and then the required output. So they're
Mm,
saying they have a sense of like, okay, here are my revenue targets for this year. I know that maybe X% of that I want to come from outbound, but then the hope is in the equation to the top of funnel from there.
ah,
So they're not actually going through and doing that math to understand, okay, if I need X amount of opportunities to hit X amount of pipeline to hit X amount of closed revenue, how many prospects do I need to be prospecting
mm,
each week, month, whatever? How many SDRs do I need prospecting if it's too many for one? There's all these sort of, we call it funnel math, right? All these pieces that you can't leave to hope. And you also kind of have to adjust your plans to the lowest common denominator because you'll always have rock star salespeople who outperform, but you can't rely on the hope that all of your people are going to be exactly like that. So that's the most common piece for me is the consistent input required for consistent output.
mhm.
There's too much hope left in there.
And James Clear, great book that he wrote, Atomic Habits. I don't know if you've gotten to read that one yet, but beautiful quote that I actually pull into the speeches that I do when I'm talking to sales organizations. And it's that we do not rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought in, you got rock star salespeople that are consistently high performers, but we have to go to the lowest common denominator because I can't target the top 2% of my organization if I'm trying to scale.
Yeah.
If it's me and Bob, the salesperson, and the rest of my folks are on, actual development and delivery, great. Bob can sell as much as he wants. He's my top 1% because he's my top 100%. He's my only salesperson. But if I really want to scale this out and I want to bring in people and get them up to speed, get them actually making quota inside of a month, yeah, it absolutely takes systems trying to figure out what are the big pieces I need to go through to get that funnel math. So I'd love to dive into funnel math with you for just a second, because that's
Mhm.
something that I think every organization could benefit from. You obviously have, math working backwards. I need to close X amount of business in a year. That equals Y amount of deals, which is going to equal Z amount of meetings, proposals, contacts. What are
Mhm.
some areas of funnel math that you find most organizations overlook, or they've just never figured out? Maybe I should be examining and measuring that.
Yeah. The biggest piece, honestly, is the cost associated with outbound.
Hmm.
It is much more, the opportunity cost is much higher with outbound. You're likely paying for data. That's a cost in itself. You're paying these people who are spending their full amount of time going out and doing cold outreach, which 100% of that is absolutely not going to convert. So much of their
Hmm.
time is costly and not yielding opportunities. So the opportunity cost is the piece that I often feel is missing. And what results is that companies can be focusing on deals that are too small. The
Hmm.
average deal size is just simply too low to make sense in terms of the opportunity cost. And so, what you find if you're kind of actually adding up all your costs and going, okay, we're generating X amount of pipeline and revenue. What is it minus cost? We're actually not even breaking even from
Oh
outbound.
no, yeah, that's a
So
that's a
what does
bad
that mean?
situation.
It's a bad situation. And what does that mean? It means, okay, we were looking at an average deal size of say $2,000 a year. We
Mhm.
see that number creeps up in terms of the average that you need to see the results that you want in terms of revenue. Back when predictable revenue was written, we said 10,000 was a good average deal size. Now we're saying it's closer to 15, maybe 20. As things
Mm.
have just gotten more expensive. It takes longer to break in to accounts. The buying process is more complex. So you've got to work more people. Um, and with outbound, the lucky thing is you do get to choose who you're going after. So you can set those qualification criteria. You can do your best to build those lists right on the onset before you even start targeting, saying, okay, those companies that are going to get us the $20,000 plus deal size, what do they look like? Looking back at our best
Mm.
customers, who all was involved, what are some of those criteria we can put on the list build to make sure we don't even get companies that are not going to get us that deal size. And then your qualification criteria are kind of the second step, the little catch point, I guess, for you to be able to make sure that anybody you're passing through the pipeline, it is going to yield that revenue amount, which in turn is going to make sure that your costs are offset by the revenue that you
Mhm.
generate.
And I love the idea of systemizing prospect selection, because that's not something a lot of salespeople do. I mean, speaking to salespeople that have been around a while, literally they started with the phone book. and say
Mhm.
start at the A's and just move down the line until you find the right person with the qualifications you're looking for and start selling. And obviously that's a really bad way to go about prospect selection. But I find a lot of salespeople do something similar with Google, or they do
Yep.
something similar on LinkedIn. They're just targeting companies that maybe are in the industry, but they're not taking the time to ask, is this a good fit? Does it
Yeah.
align with the values of the organization I'm selling for? Does it align with my values if I'm in any way responsible for product or service delivery? And do they have the budget to meet my needs so that I can actually have a bottom line that's in the green instead of the red? So I
Yeah.
think this would be a great system to build for salespeople, this
Yeah.
identification of prospecting on the front end of a sales cycle. Because and I don't know about you, Sarah, but I've sold long deals, 18 months long, finally to discover that the budget just wasn't there. And I looked at the 18 months I'd invested. And I was like, I can't walk away from this because I'm too sunk.
Mm.
So I'm going to have to take a tenth of what this thing is actually worth, because I can't justify the 18 months I burned pursuing this
Yeah.
for nothing. And of course, those are never deals that work out well for a salesperson or the client. So I think it's absolutely critical that we start off on the early stages with systemizing how we actually choose prospects, so that when
For
we
sure.
are putting them into those funnels, those systems, those campaigns, those outreaches, we know that if this thing does convert, it'll be that 15, 20, 30, $100 million deal, whatever it needs to be. So
Yeah.
when we talk about building systems here at Bulletproof Selling, we're trimming hope away from sales strategies. That's what I saw these troops do all over the world. Every time they would brief or debrief, it was slowly trimming hope away from their mission set so they could have more of a chance of coming home. And now salespeople can have more of a chance of being successful. So that acronym TRIM, TRIM, starts with T, which is the trigger element. When would you recommend that a salesperson start this system with
Mhm.
prospecting? Should it be as they're developing their prospect list? Is it when they're sitting in front of their CRM and they're looking at all their accounts? Where does it really start? Where I can, do the repeatable things to begin assessing and qualifying, but I got to start somewhere. Where in the sales cycle, excuse me, does that begin?
Mhm. So I think you kind of touched on a couple of examples. It will look slightly different depending on how your management might hand down to you who you should be reaching out to. Maybe you're given a target account list, in which case,
Hmm.
when you've been handed those accounts, that's your trigger because now you're looking at who do I need to target in those organizations. You'd hope that the account itself has been sort of vetted by management. But
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, SDRs are given kind of free reign, or sales reps are given free reign. It's like you've got this territory,
Right.
find the people within it. So then that's your trigger. It's really before you even step into that CRM, before you start to write your sequences, figure out who you're going to call. So I think, yeah, if we say if you're somebody who has kind of free reign, it's a perfect example to build for you. And so that trigger is simply, I'm now getting ready to prospect. Who should I? That's your trigger.
Mm. All right. And so we've got the trigger element. Now the R in trim is making this thing repeatable,
Mhm.
so that I can be more present with my research and in my outreach. I don't have to think about the 9 things or 12 things or however many things we come up with on this show that I should be doing to vet my prospects. But
Yeah.
how do I begin to look at the prospects that I am pursuing, given the fact that this could apply to any industry, Sarah, and
Yep.
really decide who's worth putting in the pipeline and investing time in a 6 month, 18-month, 34-month sales cycle? We don't know how long these things are for the
Mhm.
listeners we have. So how do I begin to really determine what makes a good prospect for me and is worth the investment?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest place to look is closed customers that already exist. You can
Mm,
speak to the salespeople that move those through. If they're kind of on the delivery side, you can speak to those people. But you want to look at your best customers. Those, generally speaking, there's 20% of your customers that generate 80% of the revenue. So you're looking at
mhm,
those top 20% of those customers and saying what made them pay so much? Why did they value our solution so much that they were willing to fork up that much cash? Who all was involved in the buying decision? And from
mhm.
there, you need to build out your ideal customer profile criteria. Your company likely already has an ICP, but often that ICP is closer to a TAM, a total addressable market. It sort of incorporates companies that we'd be happy to come in through inbound, but aren't necessarily going to yield that outbound
Right.
criteria. So we need to adjust and build our outbound ideal customer profile.
Mm,
We want to incorporate things like anything that did impact that ability to do that large deal. So maybe if you have like a per seat model, we need to make sure the headcount is there. If you're land and expand because you have to work with a bunch of different business units, we need to make sure they have a bunch of different business units. So all these things that can kind of incrementally impact that deal size, you want to look at those things, write them down as your outbound ICP. And then when you're
mhm.
looking at companies to incorporate in your outreach, you're looking back at those criteria and saying, does this meet them? If not, push it aside, let it come in through inbound. If it does, perfect.
You know, something that is really fascinating to me, because I hear it from a lot of different folks, is the idea of a cultural fit with customers. And there's been times in my sales career where if you had the dollars, I'd do business with you. But I've learned over time that some clients are not worth the trouble. Even if they're lovely people, their companies, like you said, just aren't the right size, the right fit for the long-term opportunity that strategy calls for, whatever your long-term sales play is. So where do you fall on, or what advice do you have for folks that are trying to determine, all right, I've got the hard metrics, the objective stuff. I can tell how many people are in their company, what kind of downstream opportunity there might be. But how do I begin to assess for fit in, will I like doing business with these people?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think there's a couple of different ways you can approach it. So if you are a tech solution and you're kind of pushing digitization, modernization, all those types of things, if you're selling into kind of traditional spaces, traditional industries that generally lag behind, you need to make sure that that person that you're speaking to that is kind of going to drive this project with you is bought into the idea of digital transformation. So you
Okay.
need to understand from them, help walk them through with you, building out what the impact of this will be in their business. If they can kind of build out that business case with you, like say, for instance, you say, so what's your average, I don't know, we'll say it's an e-commerce company. What's your average order volume? Okay, this. And what kind of ticket price are we dealing with here? Okay, this. So if you were losing X% less, what kind of revenue impact might that have? And so you can do the math on your own, of course, but you're walking them through doing that math. And if they're kind of driving that conversation forward as well, you know that they've got kind of the push and the pull. The jobs to be done theory says that there's kind of certain elements that push people towards a new solution, and then certain things that kind of hold them back. So you want to make sure pain is pushing them forward, saying like the risk of inaction is too painful, and then the pull is the excitement, the benefit, the value that's coming down the line. So that is a big one, I would say there. The other way you can ask it, and I think it's particularly beneficial in outbound, because we're dealing with people who are not necessarily in a buying window when you first reach out. They maybe
Right.
haven't even thought about solving this problem. Maybe you just catch them and they think, oh, that's kind of a cool product. Like, sure, I'll have a conversation. It can be interesting to understand if they've ever tried to solve this problem before. So do they recognize it's a problem? Have they been looking for different tools? How long have they been looking to solve the problem? Because that gives you a sense of what the actual urgency is to solve this. And it'll kind of speed up the sales cycle, make that process a whole lot easier. And then again, there's that buy-in. They've wanted to solve this problem. They'll likely commit whatever part of it they need to commit to make this engagement successful if they've been trying to solve the problem before. And I think those are two kind of easy ways to identify that cultural fit.
And there's a couple of things you mentioned on identifying, and then I noticed what you were doing was just figuring out, all right, what are the challenges around that? So if we're looking at this ideal buyer profile, and it's got 8 points to it based on who the decision maker is and the geography of the organization and how many employees they might have, what competitors they have in their market space, why your product or service helps them get a leg up, get an edge, whatever that might be. We can also take a look at the answers under each of those things. So let's say that you find most of your key decision makers are the heads of buying committees. All right, so maybe they're sitting over the proposal process, but they're the ones that are heading up the committees. If we ask the question, what do they care about, and what takes up the most amount of their time in this, and how can I solve those problems for them with something that might not even involve my product or service, but just to be able to be a value add to their lives, so that I'm seen as a person that's there to help, not just to pitch something. And you can do that on every single indicator that you use along the way to develop this key prospect profile: geography, decision maker status, job titles they might have, budget window, budget at all, right? All these different things can be used to help you build your questions to assess not only are you a good fit, but how can I be of value to you today, so that in 6 months or a year, when that contract is up, when that vendor is on the way out and you're looking at new ones, that I can be front of mind for you. So we've got the trigger, making it repeatable. Now, the I in trim is making this thing improvable. And I know you're an expert at this, because you don't just work with an organization, give them something and say, all right, it's going to work forever. See you guys in 10 years. I mean, you got to make sure it stays up with the market, make sure it stays up with their employee head count, their head count, the skill set of their salespeople. So how would you recommend that I take something like identifying my key ideal prospect and make sure that I'm improving it, so that a year from now, or after the next variant of COVID comes through, I'm not suffering, wondering, I'm doing the same 10 things, but my results suck. So how do I make sure I'm improving this and keeping it on the up and up so it continues to see improvement.
Yeah. So you need to build in a cadence for revisiting all of your kind of initial research that goes into
Mm,
this. So that's looking at your market or potential multiple market segments that you target, and Googling easy things like trends in X market in 2022, challenges for X persona in 2022. Like really, it's
mm,
easy to come across this stuff, but you've got to force yourself to look at it. And I say on a quarterly basis at an absolute minimum,
mhm.
ideally on a monthly basis. And that's kind of looking at the overall market, because you bring up a great example with COVID. When you think about companies that were maybe targeting small, like SMB, their targets
Mhm.
were SMB, those SMBs all of a sudden in COVID probably didn't have the budget and they needed
Right.
to move up market to the mid market size. A perfect example. So you need to be looking at the market and saying like, okay, any changes in the market trends, anything that I can use that is going to determine whether or not I need to change those customer kind of company wide criteria. And same thing on the persona level. So say you're targeting CFOs, you can do the same thing. Challenges for
Mhm.
CFOs, trends, whatever. So you need to keep that cadence in there to revisit that, and anything new you learn, you want to put into that playbook. Then the other part of it is, and this is lucky because salespeople are constantly having these conversations, is kind of keep your ear to the ground with those conversations. If you're hearing things from a particular CFO that you're talking to, go research that.
Mm,
Double check it with another CFO and kind of validate it. Go chat to the CFO at your company and ask, is this what you're experiencing as well? You have the benefit of being on the front lines. You're kind of the little touch point to the market multiple times a day, every day. So that's where you need to have the confidence to kind of run that up the ladder and say like, here, I've learned this thing. I think we should be reaching out about this. I think we should be preempting this objection and putting this in our email cadence. Run that up to your leader. And
mhm.
kind of for leaders that might be listening, have the humility and also the expectation that you want that information to be run up to you, because we do need to adapt these and iterate these strategies all the time. No
Yeah.
one strategy sticks honestly for more than a couple of months in outbound. So having a cadence for revisiting the research, and then ear to the ground with the people that are, customer facing, that are speaking with the market and getting that feedback.
And being willing to pivot, make
Mhm.
sure that you're staying ahead of the rate of change rather than waiting for change to pound you on the side of the head to say that doesn't work anymore and you're losing
Yeah.
money because of it.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was actually building a private sales system for one of my clients just this last week out in California, and we're building sales agendas. So, how do you set an agenda prior to actually getting in the meeting, and what do you talk about during the meeting specific for their industry? And their improvable piece on their sales agenda was we have a list of questions because it's in the agenda, but you have to track after a meeting what questions were asked that you didn't have an answer already prepped for, because that's how we were improving those sales agendas. And what their sales leaders did to have the humility to ask the question was to meet with their team and say, all right, you had 4 meetings. What questions did you hear that weren't in your agenda of things to
Mhm.
ask? And those
Mhm.
are questions from the decision maker to the salesperson, but they might be around quality of service or delivery or financial terms. How long can you price lock this for me, or whatever that is? And you hear those things often enough, you're like, light bulb, maybe we should start addressing that in our sales process because it's important to our decision makers, even if we
Mhm.
didn't realize it at first. So I love this idea. We have the trigger now, the repeatable part, making it improvable. Now, the final bit is making it measurable, because I need to know that if I'm investing the time into this sales system for finding ideal prospects and systemizing that process, that it's better than the way I was doing it before. Now, I
Mhm.
could track closed deals. Is that greater than the amount of deals that I was doing before? But that's too easy for you, Sarah. So I'm going to ask you to go a level deeper. What should I be tracking in addition to just gross business? Is it size of deal? Is it repeatability of these clients, upsell opportunities? What am I looking for to make sure that the prospects I'm putting in the pipeline now with this process are better than the ones that were there before?
Mhm. Absolutely. So there's a couple of points throughout the customer journey that you can look for that data. Absolutely. Like you're saying, closed deals is going to be one, but you might not gather that information until quite late. You don't want to
Right.
wait until those deals are closing to start measuring it. So the first place that you can look, kind of moving back up the customer journey, back up the funnel, is the meetings that are converting from qualification to that next step, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
might be. So if you are a full cycle rep, you're likely doing qualification and discovery in one little chunk. So maybe it's like that discovery call into demo, whatever the next step is down the funnel. If you do have an SDR and an AE in delineated roles, it would be the qualification call that the SDR is doing, and then the
Mm-hmm.
handoff. What happens there? Are they qualified when they meet that handoff? Is the AE prepared to have a really great conversation because of all the information you've gathered in your qualification call? And then are they willing to have the next call? So you can kind of take a look at all of your deal stages, all of your kind of stages beyond the initial engagement, the positive engagement that you have with the prospect, and look there. Is conversion better here? Because one of the things with this outbound ideal customer profile is, of course, they suit your needs in that they're big enough headcount, whatever, but you suit their needs. You're looking for the people that have that pain in the most painful way, or that have the pain and are most incentivized to solve it, or the most excited, all those things. And that's why I say looking at your current customers is the easiest way to do that. It can be really difficult to sort of try to assume that from a blank
Yeah.
market. But all of those places, you want to reduce the bottlenecks at every single step. And so looking all the way back just from converting that initial meeting to opportunity, that's the easiest place to look and get the most frequent and kind of quick feedback on whether it's working. And then absolutely the other things you want to look at is like, is the value, the dollar value that's associated with this deal bigger than what we were looking at before? Once you actually close those people, lifetime value should be longer if they're that better fit.
Right.
Because like you gave that prime example, sometimes we sell people just because they say yes and they kind of fit the initial criteria we need, but maybe they didn't actually see the value in this. They didn't put in the effort on their end to make it work, and they churn after a couple of months. So there's all these things that you can look at along the pipeline, earliest being just initial conversion, and then look at conversion every step of the way, dollar values, and then even on the kind of customer success side, looking at lifetime value and all that stuff.
And something that I saw military teams do on every single one of their plans was after they got done laying it out, they would then invite a group of people in that didn't see the plan get built, and they would say, how would you defeat this?
That's great.
And, so like you're thinking of going into a city, right? Like we got a whole bunch of stuff going on in Europe right now. Well, as these folks are getting ready to do what they do to defend the Ukraine, it's asking the question, here's our plan. But if you were on Russia's side, how would you destroy it? How would you just wreck us? And that opens up gaps in your strategy that then you can do everything you can to close. So I know that you've tried to implement or have implemented things like what we're talking about, this sales system before, helping people find these ideal buyer profiles, making sure that the deal size is going to be large enough to justify the use of sales reps and pursuing them. Where do you find it often hit major speed bumps or outright fail? What are some real key areas we need to look out so we don't end up in that trap as well?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, just to your point of that, kind of the idea of looking and saying, how do we defeat it? We absolutely use that. We call it a pre-mortem, which
nice.
Obviously, you post-mortem something to see what went wrong. We try to pre-mortem, and it's exactly what you're saying. It's like you looking at this, where are the challenges? Where are the potential roadblocks? How could you poke a hole in this? So I love that idea. Some of the places that we see, stumbling blocks, honestly, particularly it's around the more tactical stuff. So people can kind of get the go-to-market side of things and understand conceptually, okay, bigger deal sizes, this type of company, all of that stuff. But then when it comes to actually changing the way you reach out to those people to give yourself the best opportunity for conversion, maybe they're still stuck in their old messaging. Maybe they're still using old call scripts. Maybe they're reaching out to every single persona with the same message as if they're all part of some large group. That's the biggest hitch that I see in these playbooks. People set themselves up for success, but then don't adjust the little tactical things. And we see across the board, and I think you'll have seen the same thing. I don't think anybody can deny it when they've tried it, that relevance is the most important thing in your outreach. And you can't be relevant to a CFO, a CTO, a CMO, and a CRO in one message.
With the same messaging. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not going to work. So you need to, that's where you go back to your kind of, it is a go-to-market piece, but you go back to your persona research and you've got to ask yourself questions about those personas. You likely can group a couple of them together. Maybe you're in the mid-market, you're going after mid-market. And so you're like your CTO and your VP technology, maybe they're the same. So you can give yourself little umbrella personas. It doesn't have to be every single individual title, but you need to group them into the smallest possible, lowest common denominator again. The smallest group where you can speak to them with the same message. And then you need to ask yourselves questions about them. And again, you can just do your research on job descriptions on LinkedIn, Indeed. You can Google some stuff, but you need to understand what do they do in their day-to-day? What does their job actually look like? Because you need to be able to come in and show that you get what they do. What are they measured on? KPIs, metrics, what would get them promoted? What would get them fired? Who do they work with? Where do they sit on that buying committee? Are they a champion? Are they a potential detractor? Are they the economic buyer? There are all these kind of prompts that you can follow to really understand understand what these individuals are dealing with so that you can write to them with the most relevant message, or speak to them on the phone with the most relevant message. And that can often be the most difficult part, but it's really commonly the place that most companies struggle to just, it's that last piece bridging all the go-to-market research you've done and actually getting those opportunities and conversations.
It's toughest probably to drive that first conversation and have someone say, okay, tell me more. And if we're not showing up, being relevant, understanding their challenges, then that's just not going to happen. So I can tell the next time that we get together, Sarah, for a sales system build, we're going to talk about how to get the attention of prospects, because I think you got a lot of value to add there. So for the folks that are hearing Sarah's mindset, the way that she really puts all this stuff together in sales, and you want to know more about her, the company that she's part of, and how they help sales teams, Sarah, where do we find out more about you and the great work you're doing to build these teams all over the world?
Yeah, the best place to do that is LinkedIn, Sarah Jane Hicks on LinkedIn. Shoot me a connection request. I'll absolutely respond to that. And yeah, you can ask me any questions you like. I've got plenty of resources I can point you towards. And of course, if you're a sales leader that's looking for some of that help, I'm open to that conversation as well.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, thanks so much for your time joining us today to build these systems. And for all of our listeners and viewers out there, make sure you're following us on LinkedIn and YouTube for these live streams. We archive every single one of them. So if you want to just listen to brilliant people talk sales, that's my job, to interview these brilliant people. And it's a job that I treasure a lot, because I always learn something as well. And of course, for the podcast that we produce out of this, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that podcasts can be found. And for more sales systems to help you replace hope with certainty across your pipelines, to help you bring the lessons of the battlefield into your business, make sure you're checking out the free resources that we are posting every single week over at bulletproof-selling.com. Sean Rhodes here. It's been a pleasure serving the sales community alongside you, Sarah Hicks. Have a great day, and let's make selling bulletproof.